Hi, my name is Gil Zilberfeld and I'm a developer in the Typemock team. Today I'm going to answer a question that comes up frequently. How do I use Typemock Isolator to mock database calls? Let's start with why I need to do the mocking in the first place. We all know that database queries impact our ability to do unit tests effectively. In some cases, I don't have any access to the database. In other cases, writing to the database might change the initial condition I'm testing my code with. However, I do have the code that does depend on accessing the database, and I'd rather test my logic without any database dependency. I'm going to use Typemock Isolator to mock database calls and return my own fake data in order to test my logic. Here's the code I want to test. I have a getUsers method on a data access object that creates a connection object and a command, executes a query on the database, returns a reader. From the reader I can read records, and if it returned any rows, I can read data from it. But all this is not interesting for what I want to test. I want to test that even if I don't have a database, that a user object is returned if I supply a value from originally the database, but on my test I'm going to supply it by myself. So I'm going to test that a user object is actually returning. Let's write a test for that. So I already prepared a frame for the test. I'm going to test the getUsers method, and I'm going to supply a fake username, and I'm going to expect to return a user object. So let's start writing the test. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use Typemock Isolator's natural mocks. So I'm going to write a recording block. I'm going to need a recording expectation objects that a recorder manager creates. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to abstract all the calls to the database that we went through. The way I'm going to do this is by actually setting up expectations, by writing codes that is very similar to the code in the DAL. So let's take a look at the code in the DAL object. First, we're going to mock the using statement, because the using statement is actually a constructor and a dispose call. So we're going to use the same syntax. Using SQL connection, and we're creating a new connection object, and the constructor takes one parameter, but since we're recording expectations and we don't care about any parameters, we'll just supply a null. What do we do? What next we're going to do is create a command object. Again, this is actually not creating a command object because it's not really running, but Typemock Isolator uses its magic to infer from code that looks at correct calls, regular calls, that it's going to expect them. So the xscale command object takes two parameters. Again, although the real code needs a query and a connection, I'm not interested because I'm not testing for them right now. So I'm going to supply nulls again. Next is to open a connection. And now we're going to supply a reader. Now the execute reader creates a reader, but since we're not going to really run the execute reader command, we need to supply a reader. SQL data reader has a private constructor, so in usual terms we can't really create it. But using the data reader, using the recorder manager, let's call it a fake reader. The recorder manager has the ability to create a mocked object of type SQL data reader. So the recorder manager creates a fake reader, and we're going to supply it. Now let's take a look at the DAL again. So we're going to set an expectation on the execute reader command. We're going to use the expect and return method, and we're going to supply command execute reader method, and we're going to return the fake reader. Next, we're going to, let's again take a look at the code. We're going to set an expectation for the read method. Now it looks like the read method does not have a return value, but actually it returns a boolean. So I'm going to supply a value, although I'm not really interested in that, just that Typemock can dot read. And I'm going to supply just a false value, although it doesn't really matter which one. Next, I'm going to set an expectation for the hasRow property. So again, row expect and return, and the fake reader dot hasRows, I want it to return a true value. This way, this value when it runs will return true, and we're going to set we're going to go into this block, and the final expectation I want to put is on reading the value. So I'm going to supply a value. Again, expect and return fake reader with the indexer of username, should return Gil. Anything but null, really. And finally, I need to set an expectation for the close method. Now the close method returns void, so I can just write it close fake reader dot close, and that's it. That's all the things we need for setting the expectations. Now that we set up the expectation, we can actually test the code. What I'm going to test is very simple. I'm going to test that, providing the path that we set the expectations for, I'm going to expect an object to return when I call getUser. And again, it doesn't really matter which parameter I use. So I expect this to work because, like we said, we set up the hasRows to return true, and this is going to be a value, and we're going to return it. And let's compile it, and let's run it. And it passes. Great. Let's take a look at what we've done. Get rid of this. Okay, so we had a code that accesses the database, but we didn't want it to go to the database, so we wanted to isolate all the calls to the database. So we set up expectations for opening the connection, the command, opening the connection, creating and retrieving a reader. Another expectation was set to the read, hasRows, and actual returning values of the reader object, and finally the close. So all these things were mocked, and we supplied the correct values in order for the test to pass. So we made sure that if data is returned from the database when it runs correctly, we will get an object, and that's what we tested in our set flows. So that's it for today. You can find more information on our site, also on our team blog, and of course you can join us in the forums for further discussion. Do let us know what you think about these movies, because we want to produce more. Thank you very much. See you next time.